Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. And let me introduce myself first. I don't know if I've met everyone in here. My name is Jill Malloy. I am an associate broker in the state of Virginia, also in the state of Maryland, and I've been instructing for years. They tell me as an instructor that one thing I need to do is establish my credibility, give you some background to establish credibility. So if I can do that very quickly, I thought about all of the things that I am proud of in my life, and here's what I'd like to tell you. Chuck, I am the grandmother of 5 future Nobel Prize winners. That's what I am proudest of in my life. And whether or not that gives you confidence about what we're going to do here today, I'm not sure, but at least I established some credibility. Here's what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about, I said, hopefully, about Maryland fair housing. And since we do have more than one state represented here, I think very necessarily we will end up talking about some other fair housing, but I'm considering this my opportunity to also practice a class that I teach pretty regularly, and because of that, I will have some Maryland-specific questions here for you. Please don't worry if you can't answer them. You don't live in Maryland. So if we can move through with that concept in mind. Just a couple of ground rules. If this were a real CE class, and let's pretend that it is, then we would have ground rules that we have to be aware of. And these are the ground rules that the monitor would share with you. They would say, be present in the classroom, be focused in the classroom. And they would tell us that it's important for you to silence your cell phones. But then there's the rule that I have, and that's this rule. My rule is that you participate in the classroom, and that's what I really ask of you. I ask you for your participation because what I know is this. The wisdom is not all at the front of the room. The wisdom is throughout the room, and if we don't share it throughout the room, then it gets to be a pretty boring class. So I'm going to ask you to participate with me in this class, if you would. When we say that you're going to participate, there are 3 rules of participation that I'd like to address with you if I could. And the first rule of participation has to do with questions. And yes, it has to do with asking questions if you have them, but moreover, it has to do with the fact that I may ask you a question from time to time. And if I ask a question, please don't let me die up here. Please, somebody respond. I promise I will do my level best to make you right. If you will just respond, don't let me die. So certainly I want you to ask questions. Certainly I want you to respond to questions. In addition to that, I would ask that if we have a special way of responding to questions, that you also participate in that. How many of you have a cell phone with you? Have a cell phone? Good. Ordinarily in a CE class in some of your states, they would say, turn those cell phones off. Get them out of here. I said silence them. Here's what I'd like you to do. Pick that cell phone up and have it right there with you because you may need it during the course of the class. Everybody okay with that? Pick your cell phone up. You may need to use it. Keep it silent. So as we look at this, what we know is that the class is better when we all participate because no one person is as smart as all of us. Nobody's as smart as the whole class together. I would also ask that when a discussion arises, you participate willingly in the discussion. What is the reason some people don't like to participate in discussions? Oh, thank you, Kim. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I didn't want to let you die. Embarrassed.
Yeah.
They're embarrassed that they might have the wrong answer.
We're embarrassed we're going to say something wrong. In fact, they say that's one of the top fears adult human beings have. They call it the fear of public speaking, but honestly, it's the fear of public speaking incorrectly, saying something wrong. So what I would say is this. Let's also be kind to one another. When we get into discussions, we all know how to handle discussions in a way that we can collaboratively disagree and still come to consensus. Can we agree that we're going to be kind to one another in this room? Good, because then we will participate. So we've got questions we're going to deal with, we've got discussions that we want to engage in our participation, and then I'm going to ask some of you who are really willing to step up to be willing to share with the group. Not only your ideas, but ideas that come out of group discussions. Any questions about how we're going to do this? Good, perfect. Then I want you to get ready for questions right now. Here's what I'd like you to do. Pull that cell phone out. And I want you to send a text message to this number. The number is 22333. Some of you already know what it is. And here's the message I want you to send. Susan Malloy, yes, that's me. Susan Malloy, M-A-L-L-O-Y, 662, all one word. Hit the send button. You should get a message back. Anyone get the message back? Anyone get a message back yet? What did it say?
Oh, put join Susan Malloy session.
Good, you've joined Susan Malloy's session. Don't leave it, please. We'll need that throughout the class. So occasionally you're going to pick that up to respond to questions. And then we'll be able to see what the entire group thinks about a question that's been asked. By the way, I just want to reassure you about something. It won't show your name. So Shonda, do not worry. You put in any answer you want because it's not going to say Shonda said, but we will see overall how the group responds to questions. So I don't want anyone to worry about the questions. I also mentioned discussions that I want you to get into. When you're given a discussion, what I'll probably do is I'll say, oh, about 4 of you together. So I go from Steve down to Shonda and say, here's a team. Uh-oh, we got a team here that's a little bit different. So maybe I'd make it 3. So if you include Alec in yours here, and 3, if you would make sure you include Kathy. And then we've got 4 over here, and Marcy, you're going to have to move over to join your group if you would.
do that.
So what happens is when we're in the group discussions, you are going to be given an assignment. When you're given the assignment, you will understand what the objective is. You all need to get together, have a discussion. It's important that everybody participates, no one monopolizes, and that we are kind to one another. It's okay to disagree, just do so in a kind fashion. Any questions about what you're going to do with that? Tom?
I sent a text to Susan, or to the 22333, and I put Susan Malloy 662, but I've never been allowed there yet.
You have not gotten into the room yet?
Do it again.
No, I haven't either.
I did a capital letter.
Do it again. I had to do it twice.
Try
I did
it
it.
once more.
Okay.
It is important to get yourself set up to answer questions. Thank you for saying that, John, because
Well,
you weren't the
I'm
only
sorry.
one.
Well, I tried to do username and it said that wasn't it.
Susan Malloy, it's not Jill Malloy, Susan Malloy, 662.
Okay, I
That
got it
number-
yeah, I
that
got
time,
that.
so maybe you might have to try it 3 times or 2.
I got that email,
Well-
but when I click on it, it won't let me do anything.
You got a response to the text.
Yeah,
Good, that means you're in the room, right?
but if I.
You got a message back. Don't worry about it when you send a message back to me. So you'll be able to reply to this message.
Oh,
Does
okay.
everyone hear what happened there? So if you got a message back that said you have joined Susan Malloy's, you aren't joined yet? Alex, are you joined?
Still working on it.
You know what?
So just to help out here, I did 3 times. I finally got the Poll Everywhere. Then you have to log into Poll Everywhere as a participant, and then put Susan Malloy 662 into that field.
You had to log in as a participant first.
Yes.
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 I thank you for saying that
That's
because
okay.
I have not had that happen.
I I'm a tech guy and I love to figure out when it doesn't
Yeah.
work, so anyway.
So-
But I'm logged in, and if you'll come, just say you're a participant, and then put Susan Malloy 662 in it. That's another time, and you'll go
Great,
right into the first question.
great. If you've used it in the past, you end up in Mark Barber's room.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, if you have used it in the past.
I think it makes a difference if you've used Poll Everywhere before, because I'm already registered. So when I put
When you-
her identity in, it
Correct.
just accepted me right away.
Thank you.
So,
So Sam says if you have used it in the past, you're probably in. How many of you are in? How many of you are not in?
You have this screen.
Good. If you want to join in, you are welcome to. It is not necessary because you can answer the questions without entering the system. So I don't want you to worry about it. Don't want you to worry about it. It's just more fun for us to get a reading on the room. If in fact, you go ahead and are able to get into the system. So here is the first discussion that I'd like you to have. And yes, I would like you to, there's a group of 4, Steve, Kushanda, group of 3, include Alex behind you. Group of 3, include Kathy. Marcy, thank you for moving over. Every 2 years in Maryland, we take a fair housing class about Maryland fair housing. Every 2 years. How many of you have taken a fair housing course a few times now? Yeah. How many of you sometimes yawn through the class? Oh, I'm sorry. The fact is, you've taken this course a few times. This is what I'd like for you to discuss. And I'd like you to take 4 minutes, and only 4 minutes, and have someone from your team ready to share one reason with the rest of us as to why you think we take fair housing every 2 years. What is the benefit? And I phrase that just a little differently here. This is what you can look at. Here's what you're brainstorming. What is the benefit to real estate licensees or to the community at large? What is the benefit to our taking fair housing every 2 years? Any questions at all? Good.
keep updating on changes. This is a great way.
Yeah. Sometimes people have I didn't realize you were not doing something you should have been doing.
So it sounds like we have to do fair housing like we have to do.
Yeah,
I don't know of any other state, any states that require fair housing.
Interesting. All 3 of my jurisdictions do.
But like Washington DC has like 18 classes.
21 now.
Oh, yeah, they have like
21 classes.
a fair housing class, like political parties one.
Political parties are protected class.
Yes. I audited a class.
Protected from who?
But you can't discriminate. Yeah, you can't discriminate. So in Idaho, there are people that are like, they don't want outsiders coming in, so if they come and have the wrong bumper sticker on your, there might be a sign that's not selling it. It's not going to fit in the neighborhood, right?
Right.
And I drove in the neighborhood one in Idaho when I was showing houses, because I try to stay neutral about everything. Every house had a huge flag, an American flag and a Trump flag, like 20 houses there. And I was like, oh, it's so significant. I thought somebody's going to say something. And when people did, they were like, thank goodness you're showing us houses in a place where we are going to be like minded with other people. And
But it could have easily gone the other direction.
easily gone the other direction, and it puts you in an uncomfortable. I didn't want to have a conversation about politics. It's like, that's not, I'm here to
Politics,
sell you
religion,
a
and now
house,
COVID.
right?
I've had COVID and that list.
But anyway, yeah, it could have affected, I can see why they would have that in Washington.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, not to sound like this is not a
minority. Now with Article 10 changes of 10.5. She was on a webinar that I was on the other day that actually Leah had sponsored. And she was discussing the Article 10 and the new case interpretation. And the case study said that a person had listed a house, sent a photographer out, or took pictures. And one of the pictures that got posted in the MLS was a picture of a Confederate flag hanging on the house. And so it goes on to explain that went out, it was circulated, it was published, it was out of violation of 10.3. And the answer came down was, do you think it was?
Have ethics? Yeah, I would say yes.
1 minute warning.
But the person who was representing said that the fact that we had a complaint was that it was the problem, that wasn't. The problem was that they had a totally and so that was a huge misunderstanding. So I could see why NBC.
Yeah.
That was everything to protect classes.
There was someone in Idaho, a seller, we're not doing an FBI background membership.
Got 30 seconds. Make sure someone's prepared to share for your group.
FBI is investigating. And the buyer got upset because he found out it was a seller. He had some kind of connection, he did some kind of pretty serious kind of protecting, but the buyer found out about it. They confronted the seller. The seller says, I'm not really sure that like-minded people
Time.
So I
I
wanted to
hate
make
to do
sure
this,
that
but you're having so much fun
My
without
daughter's
me.
an FBI agent, but
I have no choice.
And a couple people she won't.
So,
I can't do that.
well, he did something.
Who's going to
It was
speak
like a deep one, like
for
it's like
this
I get
team?
touched 40 years ago.
Hey, you two, you guys need to decide that. I can't decide it for you.
Yes.
You just kept it off my list.
You
have very valid points.
Sam, are you
No, you were doing a great job.
What are you supposed to say? Good question, Chuck, good question. So here's what we want to know. Just one reason. Don't give us all of them you might have discussed. One reason why this is taught so often.
To make the realtors aware.
Thank you. For awareness. For awareness, thank you. And I heard part of what you were discussing, and you said you taught this back in '79?
Yep.
And you teach it today. And what did you say about that?
Black and white. Totally different.
Totally different class. Totally different class. Excellent, excellent. Who's speaking for this team of three? Now, that's not going to help us any. Somebody's going to speak.
It's much the same. It's a remembering, it's a reminding, and then if there are changes, it's something new.
So, keeping up with changes, but it's also, and what I like that you said from this team, is it is a reminder. This isn't something that we can't sometimes forget. The truth is, there are things that I've forgotten more than once about how to handle situations, and I've been in this since 1972.
Yeah.
President.
Oh, geez, so,
President
it's an
speaks.
interesting topic because I'm speaking to the Missouri Real Estate Commission on Wednesday of this week, encouraging them to make every 2 years a mandatory fair housing class. And I think when you look at some of the events that have unfolded around the country, like in Long Island Board, we noted, and you see the discrimination that occurred there, we see things like the lady from Maryland who, I forget her name.
Joanne Poole.
Joanne, when I watched that video of Joanne saying she went to show a house and the seller said, your buyers can come in, but you're going to have to wait outside. There's still some problems in our country about that. And so I think that we need to do a better job of staying top of mind what these laws are and how they apply to us as real estate professionals. And you're exactly correct. We will forget those it's good to be reminded. It's good to have new case studies that could come out. And so.
Excellent, excellent job. Who's going to speak here?
I will.
Thank you.
We talked about the difference, you know, that you might be the same class, but hearing it from a different instructor, hearing some nuances of a different perspective of how that, what protected class means, or what those, like a hoarding, for example, is a mental illness. So I was helping write a class, and I'm like, hoarding, that is, I mean, you see it all the time in the agent remarks. The client is a hoarder, and we can't put that there because that's a protected class. So bringing those little nuances of awareness to the people, they all get the fresh corn that we have, right?
Elizabeth, thank you. And Marcy, I saw a slight reaction
Yeah.
when Elizabeth said, hoarding, it's a protected class.
I'm glad I'm protected.
Thank you. Unprotected. Under what category is Marcy protected?
Who in the hell designated hoarding as a protected
Yeah, that's,
class?
The American Medical Association in 2000, what year was it, 2013, 14?
It's a mental.
It's a mental.
Make that decision?
It's a compulsive something disorder.
It's a mental illness. And because of that, is now protected under the category of
Handicap.
disability. Disability, guys, isn't that something?
There's not a disability protection, there's a handicap.
Ah, it is now called disability in Maryland. Now, federal law still calls it handicap, but I'm going to give you that in just a minute, if you don't mind, Chandra. We're going to talk about federally, how do they define? Is that all right with you?
That is great with me. because
Thank
I'm
you.
very interested in knowing.
I was interested, I have a question too, is that federally, would that fall under handicap federally or in your state?
Thank you so much. And what Tracy just asked is that federally or is that just because of Maryland's change? Is that a fair way for me to say it? Is that federally or is that just because Maryland said it's disability, not handicap? Based on the definition of handicap federally, I think it would probably fall in federally. Oh my gosh, but I promise, with your permission, we're going to look at that definition momentarily. Does that work for everyone? Oh, we're having a good time. So there is a reason, and John, you were very specific about wanting Missouri to put this in. All 3 states that I teach live in make this a mandated course every license renewal.
And what are those states? I'm sorry.
That's Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, which is not a state, but it counts.
So I'd just like to point out, because this is a room full of instructors, this is now migrated from just the Fair Housing Committee, if you will, Equal Op Diversity Committee now, I think they call it, and now migrated over to concerns under professional standards. And so therefore 10.5. And 10.5 was driven largely by inappropriate behaviors on the part of realtors in the public domain. And that's how it became a professional standards issue. How do those comments make us look rather than individuals? So two particular cases, one out of California, realtor approaches a gal, she's got a mask. She asks him to back off, he gets a little too close, and he refers her, among other things, he says to her, she's an Asian B-word. This is all recorded, and it's put on TV. In Arizona and Scottsdale, we have a case where the guy came out and approached 2 persons of color who were videographers, whatever you call them. Anyway, they were operating cameras in the public area and asked them what they were doing, like he had any business doing that. But that's neither here nor there. When they politely said to him, why are you asking us that? He said, well, this is an N-free zone. And the
Oh, my
N, by the way,
goodness.
had all the letters next to it. I'm just using that as
So-
so those 2 cases are just the tip of the iceberg for what the professional standards panel had to argue for almost 2 years to get us to 10.5. So we've got 2 parts of NAR now. involved in this. Not just equal out diversity, but also now professional standards.
Absolutely. So Alex is referring to the code of ethics and a change to the professional standards, and he mentioned 10.5. I want you to write that down. Don't worry about it right now. We're going to talk about 10.5. If you are a Realtor, you are subject to the code of ethics. If you are not a Realtor, you better know your state laws. You better know your state laws, and then you better start asking the question, is that federal, or could that be applied in my state? Oh my gosh, I wonder. I wonder what the situation is here. So, thank you so much for going through the exercise. There is reason, we'll agree that there is reason to take this off, and because there are changes, because the course was not the same in 1979 as it is today, because there have been changes to the law. That being said, here's why I think it's important, and this is my opinion. I think it's important because when people are robbed of choice about where they live, it affects everything else in their life. Everything else. If I can't live where I choose to live, it's going to affect where my children go to school. It's going to affect whether or not there's great transportation. It's going to affect whether or not I live in a food desert. What's a food desert? No grocery stores, no fresh produce. Do you know there are places in this country where that exists? So it is important for us to understand that this affects everybody, every part of everybody's life when they're robbed of the choice of where they live. So here's my question for you, because I have another question, and that is this. Do real estate licensees ever, knowingly or unknowingly, rob people of their choices?
Yes.
Marcy's saying yes. Marcy's saying yes. How does that happen, guys? How do we do that? What is it that real estate licensees that might do that closes off choice? Kim,
I think when you're inexperienced, you don't know the choices available. And then when you're super experienced or maybe only comfortable in a small area, you limit the choices. And it's not our job to make the decision for the consumer. It's our job to provide them with their options. And sometimes we impose too much on the client, and that's robbing them of their choice.
Thank you, Kim. So what Kim just said, what I heard her saying, was that sometimes new people don't even know what the choices all are, and if the client's looking to us for direction, and we try to give it, we don't know where to direct them. Sometimes experienced people make decisions for their clients. Make decisions for the clients. Shonda.
I had a situation, and if you guys don't know, I'm black, kind of. But I had a black lady get in my car, and she said, look, I don't want to live in a neighborhood full of black folks. And I was faced with that situation, and I said, I'm going to send you an email, and I want you to read it, but don't ever say that to me again. You tell me where you want to live then, since you know where you don't want to live, because it's not my job to give you the research on demographics. But that's, you know, in our culture, people are discriminatory against ourselves at times. And it's something that you guys will never know or never face probably, but there was another realtor where this lady said, hey, show me this house. And her agent wasn't available. Said, okay, I'll show it to you at 10 o'clock in the morning. She was late. And she says, the agent says, oh my God, please don't kill me. Oh my God, please don't kill me. The listing agent put the other agent's name down. Inspection came, appraisal came like 2 weeks later. There was one issue on the inspection report. They wouldn't let her out for contract. The black lady filed a discriminatory suit, not with Fair House, not with HUD, but with our local, our state agency. And The black lady said, because this agent said, please don't kill me, it was discriminatory language. Our real estate commission says, well, what do you want? And the client says, I want the cost of my appraisal and the inspection. And this agent is left to decide, do I want to go to a hearing down at the state or pay? And that was her choice, and she paid.
Okay,
That's
so
unfortunate.
the fact is, with fair housing, complaints can be made. And what Shonda just told us is a complaint can be made, and any time a complaint is made against you, a legal complaint, you have a choice. My sister practices law. And I remember her saying to me a long time ago, Shonda, it's a business decision. Don't let right or wrong get in the way. It's a business decision. Sometimes it makes more sense to settle with people than it makes to, well, that may be true. At the same time, I think that it's important that we, as the guardians of real estate, we as the guardians, make sure that our behavior encourages this. So the fact is, we sometimes do things that interfere with choice. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope it doesn't go out of this room. I'm going to tell you a story. Because this is what I did. I told you I started in 1972, did I not? This was about my third sale. Third sale I ever made. And this is what I did. Lady called in about a listing that we had, and it had just sold. It was gone. So I told her it was gone, and then I did what my manager had told me to do. I was still, wet behind the ears. So I did what my manager had instructed me to do, and I explained, we have other listings available. If you can give me an idea of what you're looking for, I would love to assist you. I would love to assist you. And she thanked me profusely. She told me that that had not been offered before, so I thought, hey, I got a smart manager. How brilliant is he? And I brought her into the office. We talked about what Connie and Bill were looking for in a home. And as it turned out, she was black, kind of. She was black, kind of, which at that time was the term that I would have used. Now I would use African American, and my Haitian friends would get angry with me. But she was black. And Connie said, what we're looking for, and she described it for me, and we got the price range down, 3 bedrooms. We'd like at least 1 bath. So she wasn't looking for a castle. And then she said, I've got 2 children I want a safe area for. And in deciding how to help Connie, who I was very fond of it by this time, I decided that it was incumbent upon me to tell her where she should live. Yeah, I did. I said, Connie, I'm glad to show you houses wherever you want. And she said, well, I saw this one ad, and she referenced it, and I said, that's in Plymouth Hills. And Plymouth Hills is very white. And I'm going to warn you that your children might have some trouble on the school bus. And I just would advise against you buying them. That's what I did. And here's my question for you. Where was my heart?
It was in the right place.
Heart was in the, thank you.
Yeah, it was in the
Shonda,
right
thank
place.
you for recognizing that. I am so appreciative of you for recognizing. Where was my head? Did I violate the fair housing law? Thank you, Marcy, for acknowledging that. I violated the law. In my effort to be a good citizen, I violated the law, and I didn't need to presume that I was smart enough to know where Connie Wilson needed to live. Connie and Bill Wilson were grown-up adults. They could decide where they wanted to live. So sometimes, with good intentions, we impose on people's choice. I know that firsthand. Anybody have anything they'd like to share? Thank you, Alex.
There's a book called The Color of Law. And highly recommend it, especially if you're teaching fair housing, because it defines a lot of history. But when you look back to, you said 1972 you got in the business?
Yes,
It wasn't until 74 that actually discriminatory language was taken out of the Code of Ethics. So when we look back in history, starting in the 1920s, when the first code came out in 1913, there was no discriminatory language in it at all. But in the 1920s, I'm not going to go through the whole story with you, but I researched this for various reasons. In the 1920s, NAR decided to bring some kind of, Sam, you're going to love this, some kind of sense to appraising. And when I entered the business, we were still doing swags, sophisticated well-dressed guesses. But way back in the 1920s, NAR sponsored, so the prodigy of NAR's efforts was actually the Appraisal Institute, which we know today, but began as something else back in the 1920s. And the two individuals involved that were largely the writers of all the language created very discriminatory language. They were clearly very biased people. And basically, I'm going to put it in a nutshell, believed and put into the writings that we, as realtors and appraisers, shall not introduce people into neighborhoods that will change the makeup of the neighborhood and therefore the values of the neighborhood. Now you reference to, you were nodding, so I'm assuming you read the book. Now you look into the color of law and you realize how that affected America today, all the way to today. So 1972, no, you didn't do the right thing. You acknowledge that. But one of the things you learn, I guess, in looking back at history is people did the best they could at the time in history that they were performing. It's hard for us today to look back and say, well, that was wrong. But during that time, it was believed to be right. So we are now a product of correcting decades of misbehaviors that we now recognize in more recent times as misbehaviors that were not, they were defended. And in fact, it took the Justice Department to sue the appraisers to finally get it out of their policy manual, and that was in the 70s. So when you did that, you were at a time when, technically you violated 1968, but again, there were a lot of folks that didn't see it that way.
thank you, Alan. And by the way, thank you for taking me off the hook, even though I should have known better. I didn't. I did what I did, and now I know not to do it. Live and learn. Live and learn. So I do want to take a look at steering specifically, which is something, does that go on today?
Yes.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Sure it does.
Chuck? Sure it does.
So what is steering?
Yeah, what is steering? What is steering? Good question, Jim. You steer a car. What's steering?
Well, and I actually was on a webinar with HUD a little while back, and they said that's the #1 violation real estate agents make, not intentionally, but just that they feel what you just did. They feel like they're trying to direct them to a location or an area that will be more suitable to their racial profile or background or
Their profile.
their
Just their profile.
I love it.
So that's basically, if you need to go live here because this is where all the Germans live, or you need to go live here because this is where all the Hispanics live.
Kathy?
There's two parts to steering. There's kind of what that is. It's directing them to or away from a particular area based on a protected class. And lots of agents catch the directing to, but miss the part direct. You're just as guilty of steering if you are directing them away from particular places because of a protected class.
And I should know that, since that's exactly what I did. That's exactly, Kathy, thank you for that. So the fact is, based on a protected class, to answer the question then, Jim, based on a protected class, their membership in a protected class, to direct people to or from particular areas. And by the way, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, it is still steering. Now, how many of you in this room, just for the fun of it, have watched the video, Long Island, the Great Divide? Oh, good. So, if you haven't, I'm going to suggest that you Google that and watch it, because you will see steering in action. Here is basically what happened. And if you watch the entire video, you will see that people who may have been of good heart, when asked, for instance, to show Brentwood, 2 buyers, test buyers, came in. 1 white, 1 black. They both had the same income. They both had the same desire for area. They described the same house. They came within days of each other. And 1 buyer was shown several houses in Brentwood. And the other buyer was not shown property in Brentwood. And in fact received a text from the agent saying, you know, I'm a little bit worried about Brentwood because there's been a lot of gang violence there. They were of different races. One was told, be careful of Brentwood, and the other was told, I love Brentwood. And by the way, she actually says this on the video. I love Brentwood. I love it when I'm involved with people from Brentwood. They're always the nicest people. Those folks from Brentwood. Oh, yeah, I'm watching the hands. So, in fact, steering does occur. What is it? Did that answer the question, Jim, what it is?
I think that helps.
Yeah, so steering. We said, what is it? My next question is, how does it happen? How do we end up steering people? Elizabeth, thank you.
One of the, I have work with buyers that need a particular price point of home, and they want to still be able to ride the bus to work, and so it would be really easy for me to just put them in a neighborhood that I knew fit that criteria as a whole, rather than I set the MLS search up for the whole city, and I let them say, no, I don't like this area, or I don't like this area. But it would be super easy to say, this neighborhood is really where you should be, because that's the only one that makes sense at the price point. Does that, so kind of, you're looking out for their best interest, no, not unlike what you are doing, but there's one neighborhood that's very large, and it has a lot of starter home areas. But there are other starter homes in Boise, you just have to look. It's just not as common, so I always just set them.
And they cost $1 million.
So I set them up for the broad search, and they can say, you know what, I don't like this area. I don't want to live near here. I would rather live out here with where my friends are, and then I have permission now to look at that area instead.
So you try to listen to their criteria, if I understand correctly. And is it okay to listen to their criteria about being on public transportation? Anything discriminatory about that? No. So that's good that you listen to that. And is it important to listen to their price point? Excellent, excellent. We just want to make sure that we show them what the choices are that meet the criteria. Marcy?
When I lived in Sioux Falls, the Board of Realtors met with the Multicultural Center. And because we have what is now Smithfields, but it was Morale Packing Plant. And so an awful lot of people from Africa, people of Hispanic culture, all moved into Sioux Falls, spoke no English whatsoever, had been doctors, lawyers, and everything else in the countries they came from. And the Multicultural Center put them all in a room, talked about living in Sioux Falls. We had agents who went down there. We have Spanish-speaking agents who went down and did, a program at Morale's during the noon hour to talk to people about housing. It was incredible. And so what they drove the conversation. And so when people would say, I want to live where other people like me live, so we can go grocery shopping together. You know, we have communal dinners. That's part of our,
Right.
that's part of the way that we live. And we want that. So as long as it passed through the Multicultural Center, and that was the instruction from them, that's how we applied that. And it worked out really, really well.
I've sold probably 100 or 150 houses to people that are from Burma for the same.
Yep.
And so they direct me where they want to be,
Yep.
and I don't direct them. I always just open it up, and I will send it. I will find a house in another part of the city, and I say, this fits your criteria. Would you be interested in it? And they say,
No.
nope. I want to live over here where my friends are, and that I feel like then I'm not steering them.
And they can decide that they want to live with people who are like them.
Right.
We can't decide that they should. And the pastor can tell them where those areas are.
Absolutely.
We can't tell them where those areas are. Does that make sense to everyone? Yes,
And I
Ken?
think to answer your question of how does steering actually happen, sometimes it's an unconscious bias. I have some clients that relocated from Philly, they're originally from Shanghai, they're house hunting right now, and they said, you know, we're looking at these two school districts, why do no Asians live in Kirkwood? Why is it less than 1%? I mean, I don't really have a great answer for it. I'll stay
Yeah.
within the lines of fair housing, and I'm not going to steer them somewhere else. But we get those questions, and we have to, you know, guide them on where they want to be.
Yeah,
How do
and
you- how
what do
would
you
you
say,
answer
by
that?
the way, when someone asks you, why is it no Asians? Why is it no Asians live here in
My
Kirkwood?
response was, I don't know, wouldn't it be nice if there were more Asians living in that community? It would make it a better place. You know, and you smile, but
And the fact is, I don't know why more Asians
I don't know.
live there. I could guess, and I'm not going to in front of the time. I won't guess that there may have been a covenant years ago prohibiting them. There, I'm sorry. Chuck and I both remember those covenants and do you remember the deed
I remember
restrictions?
newspaper ads.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
in the
we would have a
newspapers.
cross in the advertising or a Star of David in the advertising, so you know which neighborhood you wanted to go to.
Excellent. Wow.
I went all the way through 12 years of school in a segregated school. And it's hard to explain that to people today.
Me too, until 1964.
I was in one of the schools that was, they bused the college kids across Gainesville to the inner cities. So I was on the bus that went to the inner cities to kindergarten and first grade.
That was
It was,
fun,
they
wasn't it?
didn't want to segregate the white neighborhoods, they did the college kids. And I bused 45 minutes across town, so I was integrated into the school.
And you see, I love that you brought that up because when Kim talked about implicit bias, when she talked about implicit bias, sorry, get rid of that. Implicit bias often occurs, that means we didn't even know we were doing it because of our background. We feel comfortable with what we have had before in our life. And so if I were to ask you or myself, when you were growing up, who were the kids who came to your birthday parties? What language did they speak? What did they look like? Who were your Sunday school teachers? What language did they speak? What did they look like? If you are having a party at your house right now, who is invited? What do they look like? The fact is, all of that influences us internally. We aren't thinking about it consciously, but we know where certain people should be. And that's why it's so extremely important to listen to what Elizabeth said and to ensure, to absolutely ensure that they are making the choices, that we simply show them what their choices. Does that make sense to everyone? Any other comments that you have about steering before we move ahead? So, I wanted to move on then to talk about, well, what are those protected classes? We said steering has to do with discriminating against people based on their membership in a protected class. And federally, you probably can recite those protected classes by heart. Federally, you can recite them. But I want to add some Maryland protected classes to that. Because in Maryland, we added things like marital status. We added things like sexual orientation. We added gender identity. In Maryland, we added source of income recently in the state. By the way, what does that mean? Source of income? What am I talking about?
Public assistance. Saved by the bell.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
Money